Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the PUSD College and Career Showcase. I'm Jeannie Kaoli, a programmer analyst supporting the Career Technical Education Department. I will be your room host and moderator for this session. We ask that all attendees keep themselves muted unless otherwise asked. Feel free to use the chat to ask any questions. There will be a time to speak to our presenters at the end of our presentation. And as a reminder, this session is being recorded. And now I am happy to introduce our presenters, Annie Mills, Assistant Director of Admissions from DePaul University, and Caitlin James, Regional Recruitment Manager from The Ohio State University. They will be presenting how to present yourself effectively in your college application.
All right, thanks so much. We are so excited to be here and tell you a little bit more about the college application process. I know in our description, we talked a little bit more about how it only takes so long for us to review an application. So we just want to check in and kind of see how everyone's doing and hoping that you're doing okay through the college process. Maybe you are going through that this year, or maybe you're getting a head start to learn a little bit more about what that looks like going forward. So as we go through the application, my words might be a little tongue-tied. It is a little bit later in the evening. So as we go through the presentation today, we are going to have some fun and talk a little bit more about what we're looking at within the application process. So first off, what is considered? You might have heard a lot about the different parts within the application process and what we are considering. We are both working for institutions that are on the common application. So that is certainly what might be most reflected in this application process, but generally can be applied to whether you're applying to the UCs or the Cal States, similar programs. So just things to keep in mind as you are going through tonight. But just a couple of things that we are certainly going to consider. Some parts you will have more control over in the moment. Others obviously reflect a culmination of work over a semester or year, or one setting of a test to reflect the relationships that you've built or how you've grown as a student when your teachers and counselors are recommending. So we're looking at a variety of these components listed here on the screen, and every institution might look at different things when it comes to admission, maybe admission to particular programs or a major, or to a special scholarship or a cohort program. So there are a lot of different levels of what we'll be discussing here today, but we're kind of here to give a brief overview of everything and kind of tell you some tips about how to narrow it down and how to really make sure that you stand out effectively and that you work effectively and efficiently through this process. So you really make the most out of those 10 minutes that you might be reviewed in when it comes to your application. All right, moving to the next slide.
Okay, so we wanted to, in this, kind of dive into some of the other writing that you could be doing in your application, in addition to your Common App essay, maybe any specific school supplements, because there are so many other places in the application where you can talk about yourself, what you're passionate about, what you do. So as you're putting together the long list of things that may help you develop your activity summary, we want to make sure you're including things kind of in these areas, and maybe even honestly some that we're not explicitly mentioning here. We definitely want to hear about the school activities that you're a part of. As you are making this long list, make sure that you're being thorough and descriptive. Be ready to describe the organization, what responsibilities you had in the organization, how maybe those grew and changed over time. Were you a leader in anything elected or appointed as you were involved in activities in your school? Who elected you? What did you do? Why were you passionate about getting involved? I know that we have a lot of things here in the parentheses, and you can really go a lot of different ways as you're describing your activities. It's not to say that you need to include everything, and certainly, quite honestly, you won't have space to include everything. But as you start to kind of make some of these notes, hopefully it will help steer you in the right direction to say, I'm noticing these types of trends, or I really want to make sure that I highlight the why behind this particular activity and why I stuck with it for 4 years. So the more you can think, the more you can write down now, just do some of that free writing. I think the better off you'll be when you go to actually make the most use of your character count and your word count, and we'll talk about that a little later. So in addition to things that you did at school, we also want to know about any kind of what we call outside activities. These could certainly include work experiences, family responsibilities, whether that's helping to take care of a sibling, a grandparent, having duties around the house. Did you attend or work at any summer camps? Did you do any internships or shadowing opportunities? Have you volunteered? And we recognize too that those types of things might look a little bit different than they could have in the past. So was your shadowing experience or your internship in person, or was it virtual? What did you learn from it? What were your takeaways? Were you involved in any cultural or religious activities that are important to you, that helped you, kind of stay connected to others of similar mindsets? That's always something that's super great to hear about and understand the values that our applicants have. And then, have you done any what we call unorganized pursuits? This could be you are an avid hiker and every weekend you get out and are active in some way. Maybe you took some time to teach yourself a language or, to learn how to code. Maybe you're really passionate about photography and you wanted to get better at color theory. So you took some classes on, or watched a lot of videos, fell down some rabbit holes on YouTube, and you've got some takeaways from it. Those are all great things that we want to hear about. And then we want to make sure that overall you're also including things that really make you stand out, make you unique, and also things that you're proud of. So are there any honors you've received, awards? We say evidence of unusual talent or experience. It could be a wide range of things these days. Really anything that you get excited about that you would want someone to know as they're reading your application. Put it on your list, make sure that it stands out. And yes, this is a great question I saw just pop up in the chat, so we'll talk about it right now. How would you handle group or team awards, maybe for things you've been a part of, or you have leadership roles in? I definitely think you can talk about your own specific leadership experience, and then also talk about the achievements of the team in that way, shape, or form. We're likely going to know that you're not a team of one, that there are others helping you out. So you could, address the larger kind of goal or award that you won. But again, we're really getting to focus a lot on you in this process. And we want to hear what you put into it, what you took out of it. So make sure that you are including that. Let's see, Caitlin, anything I'm forgetting here?
I think these are the biggest things. And when it comes to what to include, I think what's really important is that don't forget absolutely everything. And so we'll talk about this on this next slide here. Is we've gone over already what can feel like an overwhelming amount of opportunities. Both Annie and I are actually live in San Diego. And so we've both, experienced the pandemic and similar means of what it's been like for us here, being in Southern California. And so it's been, certainly that's not lost on us. And so what's really important for us to acknowledge and just kind of concern you all with is we acknowledge that, your application and your resume may not look like what future years had done. And so we are understanding of those things. Those are things that we are taking into consideration when going through this process. And that's why we really stress maybe some of those unorganized pursuits that might have looked differently than what activities had. There's a real value in hobbies as well. And so we really want to see and encourage you to tell us everything you want to know. But in the case that our applications do have some limits there. So where do you even start when it comes to including and making a list of everything? So where do you start? You make a whole list of everything, as I said, right? You write down every activity. You might write it down by grade or year. There are plenty of sample high school resumes out there that you can Google to kind of get an idea of maybe how to list some of those things. But I think the most important thing is to start putting them all on paper, whether that's in a Google Doc or a spreadsheet, whatever really makes the most sense to you. Divide it up in certain ways that include, maybe a description, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. but maybe who you were with, how many hours per week and weeks per year. Create that list of absolutely everything. Ask your friends and family, maybe what do they see you most doing? What do you know that how you love to spend your time in private, whether that be reading books, things like that. Right, there are a lot of things to you that we want to know about. So create that entire list, and then we can kind of help shape and narrow that down from there. From that, you'll want to categorize. Maybe you're categorizing by athletic activities. Maybe it's volunteer service. You've done a sporadic amount of volunteer service. So you can group all of those things together. Maybe there are those unorganized pursuits where you group all of those together. So start to categorize in different areas, because you only have 10 activities that you can include on the Common Application. And so it's really important to understand to kind of group all those things together and then rank their order of importance. Consider the weight or the importance of that activity to you, because in some cases, it may be more important to one institution than the other. Now, within an application such as the Common App, the same thing will be going to every single institution. So it is important to note that you might want to just put the first thing at the top of what you spent the most time doing, or maybe what you're most passionate about, right? So there can be a variety of ways that you structure it, but the most important thing is to make sure that everything that you want us to know about you is there. Remember the why. What is the takeaway from this activity? Why is it important to you? And then if you include some of those things, that will become apparent to us when we're reviewing your application. What did you take away? What did you learn from that experience? And there's a variety of ways that you can include this in the description, which Amy will talk about, but you can either do it very straightforward, just to tell us what you accomplished, or you can make it a bit more of a summary. In things like, track, you have a lot of meets and events that you're going to do, but especially in COVID, I've seen examples of students saying that I practiced on my own, even though COVID canceled some of my practices, because you're that dedicated to it. So there are things that you can add into some of those description that really add context to your dedication, that tell us more about you. Consider your audience as well. You might be applying to a lot of, religious focused organizations or universities. You might be applying to a small private liberal arts institution where their mission is really important to them as they're reviewing applications, right? So considering the audience of the broad people that might be reviewing that application as you are looking at your college list too. And as I mentioned, note the time and hours spent per week, per year, so we can really understand how involved you were in that activity. This is probably the biggest question that I get asked, especially when it comes to maybe, service activities. Maybe they're part of an organization or required, et cetera. And so you really want to just kind of do your best guess, right? Kind of do the average. Maybe they're super busy seasons. I grew up dancing in high school. There were definitely more busy seasons than others, so it can vary. So maybe take the average of those. Ask your counselors for the best feedback when it comes to these details. But it's really important to kind of think about how some of these things play into consideration, if certain majors are a factor in your review, but you kind of keep that all in mind as you're making that huge list and starting to narrow it down.
I also realized I don't think I mentioned work experience at all in my initial list. So if you do have experience working in a job that feels big or a job that feels small, no matter what it is, we really want to know that. That speaks a lot to how you structure your time. So just make sure that that is there. Okay, then talking about using the space available to you on the Common Application, again, any chance you have to put your own voice into the process is going to be incredibly helpful. Yeah, certainly an internship would count as work experience. Yeah, I think that would be just fine. So when you are putting together your Common Application, just be aware that the title for a particular activity, and again, you can have up to 10, the title, you're limited to 50 characters. And then the description, you're limited to 150 characters. And this is per each thing. So when the Common App gives you available character space, it is my challenge to you to use it as much as you possibly can. So we go through like a couple examples here. A fine description. The title is baseball. The details are played catcher on the team for 4 years, starting in JV, moving up to varsity in 10, practiced each day during the season, and had weekly games. That gives us a really good idea of your progression, of how much you were involved. But the third bullet point on the page, I think, is a lot better. I also did write this, so I'm a touch biased, but I do think it's a much better use of this space. Baseball, and this is all fits in 50 characters. Baseball, JV, 9, varsity, 10 through 12. Right away, you don't have to spend any time in the description talking about your progression through the sport and with the activity. You get that all out of the way at the beginning, and then you can dive into the takeaway and what it meant to you a lot more. I'd like to focus on sports management in college, but I love playing the position of catcher. I learned to work strategically with my teammates. I think that's much better. I certainly think there are ways that this could be even improved upon, but you do get to learn a lot more about the student, about their takeaway. Maybe they will be a future intramural star, baseball star at the institution to which they are applying, but that there were some things that were really meaningful to them that they were able to walk away with, and you get a little bit of a sense of their personality. So I think putting these descriptions together can be a really great way to show what you learned from something, especially if you're not planning on moving forward with that particular activity in college, or you're looking to be involved with something maybe in a slightly related or maybe adjacent field.
Yeah, and I would say about the descriptions too, is that abbreviate like crazy if you need to. Make sure it's still readable, that we can understand it as necessary. But the other thing is important to remember is be careful with abbreviations here. While we in California might understand what CIF stands for, other institutions might, other people reading that might not understand what that means and what the context of that is and at what level you're playing at. So if you get the chance, maybe abbreviate it once and then go through spell it out once and then abbreviate it from then on, or describe to us in the description, competed at the state level, made it advanced to regionals, or whatever the description might be when it comes to especially athletic events, just because the context here is so important to us. And really make use of all of the space that's available to you here. I see too often that students really sell themselves short here. And this is where I'm probably going to learn the most about kind of your involvement, your organizations, what you do outside of the classroom. So what's important here, I think too, is just remembering that we'll look through this very quickly, but as you're abbreviating some of those things, this is where we start to kind of really fill in the pieces to the jigsaw of what makes up your entire application. And the activities list and these descriptions really make out a big chunk of that. So really pay close attention when it comes to these things and really take every space available to you to tell us more about you as well. Awesome. So we'll talk a little bit more about kind of other pieces of writing. And as we specified, this is just more towards the Common App. I know with the UC applications, you'll have your PIQs, your personal interest questions. So it'll be a little bit different based on the institutions, again, that you're applying for, but equally as important. And I know that the UCs do a great job of educating students of how to complete those as well. So really what we're going to focus on is just any school specific supplements. This is the chance that you get to tell us more about you. These are also known as just supplemental questions. And so these are really important. These are things that you do not want to leave until the end of the application process, waiting till the last minute before you submit, because this is where the school has asked you this question for a reason. They want to know a little bit more and compare those questions and answers of how, maybe to other students within the applicant pool. They might relate to their mission or the major that you're applying to. So it's really important to take some time to understand what these questions might be beforehand. Every institution is going to give you a complete list of the application and details of how to apply. And so you can see what's required of you prior to submitting. And also when you're picking your schools on the Common App, you can also see those supplemental questions and work on those ahead of time. So definitely recommend creating your account as soon as it opens so you can look into more of those supplements. Additional information section is also is also optional for our students when it comes to this. It's really important, I would say, that you can utilize this to share a little bit more about us. If you truly find it necessary, it's completely optional. But share something that you feel is incomplete with, sharing something that you feel your application would be incomplete without. I've seen some students tell us more about, someone said about an internship. Maybe they've done a research experience. They've shared more details about that. But this is important where you're not reiterating anything else that you're talking about in any other supplements. It's important that this is key and it stays the same, because it'll go to every other institution that you're applying to. So this is also not where you tell me about how much you love the DePaul Blue Devils or the Ohio State Buckeyes. You keep all of that separate, keep all of that out of your application. We know that, that's why you're applying to our school, so keep all of that separate as well. But as I mentioned, it's absolutely fine to leave it blank. Students have structured it in a paragraph. I've seen bullet point lists, more abbreviations here, et cetera. So use this as you see fit. But it's important that you're just kind of, if you want to describe something more, what takes up your time, et cetera, we want to know a little bit more about that too. There's also the COVID-19 or community disruption supplement. So community disruptions such as COVID-19 and natural disasters, as we are certainly privy to here in San Diego, can have deep and long-lasting impacts. So we want to encourage students to take advantage of these spaces. You'll indicate if you want to share anything on this topic. If you do, great. If not, no worries, that's okay. But you'll use this space to describe how it impacted you. And again, another space to encourage students to share anything else that they want to include. And the response is limited to about 250 words. So maybe it's time specific, how you've helped a sibling, any activities or internships that were canceled, work as well, what that looked like. As I mentioned the example before, the track athlete practiced on their own because practices were canceled. The world looked very different to us here in San Diego than it did in other parts of the country. So I really remind you to encourage to take advantage of reminding folks what this looked like. This is your chance to do exactly that. Education process, maybe you've jumped high schools or changed. If you want to tell us more about that, you're more than welcome to do so. I've had some students say that they've decided to change institutions or schools because they've had it was a better fit for them academically, or they had a family situation, or had an experience at school and they wanted to change to another institution. So whatever that is, it's just informing us, and there's no explanation necessarily required unless you would like to do that. And I know disciplinary information has changed there, so I don't think that's necessarily included anymore, but there are those points on there as well. Annie, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I like just two things really quickly. I think these pieces of writing that are available to you on the Common App really free you up to address any of these types of things right here and not in your Common Application essay. Your essay does not have to do all the heavy lifting to tell us about all of your experiences, to tell you how COVID has impacted, the experience freshman you thought you were going to have that didn't quite exist. And you don't have to tell us why you switched schools, all of those types of things. We have places for each and every one of those things on the application, should you choose to use it. Caitlin and I have done this presentation with another representative who I think describes especially the additional information section and its use really well. So let's say I'm sitting down with Caitlin, she's applying to DePaul University, and for some reason I've let her in the room as I am reviewing her application. I probably would never do this. But if I did, I'm reading through, I'm looking at everything, and if, as Caitlin sees me turn the page, she's like, oh, Annie, actually, wait 1 second. Before you flip the page, I just want to take a minute to explain and give you a little bit more background into, this grade here, or this class progression, or this activity that I did. Or you may feel like this is out of left field, but this is why it's actually not. And it's really consistent with who I am and what I'm passionate about. Those are the types of things, those annotations that could be really great fodder for your additional information section, and potentially for the community disruption in COVID-19 supplements as well. So take advantage of them if you'd like, and your counselors are going to be really great resources to say, how do you think I've done in terms of putting this all into perspective and sharing this? Do you think this is a good use of time? They will be really, really helpful for you as you do that. All right, and then this is one of the other things we have access to is we're reviewing your application in addition to your high school transcript and letters of recommendations that your counselor send to us is your school's profile. So we pulled the profile for Poway High School specifically and picked a couple of different pieces out of it that, as Caitlin and I would read applications, might jump out to us a little bit. We get to see, an overview of the school, where students are coming from, the types of post-secondary opportunities students take advantage of, the grading scale, what happened with COVID from a grading standpoint. Did you go to credit, no credit? Were students able to freeze their grades, those types of things? And then we could also see advanced placement and honors opportunities. So this is, so I think it's just important to keep in mind that we will have access to this type of information about you and about your school in a way that your school will put together and send out on your behalf. I think it can be really nice to take a look at it yourself as you're putting together your application, just to get a sense of what we will see and what we might be looking at you in the context of. This really helps us get to know, okay, from the rigorous courses available to the student or from the extracurriculars that they may have been interested in, here's what those were, and then we can look and see how you may have taken advantage of those. Some people like Caitlin and I who review applications from this area, we have a lot of familiarity with the schools. We live not all that far away, and we've been working with students from San Diego for a long time. There could certainly be readers and reviewers in other schools, at other schools, in other offices who for whom San Diego is a relatively rotating territory. Knowing that they will use this to get some background context, I think can be very helpful. Let's see. Caitlin, anything else? Can I see some stuff coming to the chat?
Not specifically about the profile. We might want to make sure we have time after we finish we have one more slide left, and then we'll make sure to get to the questions because I think they're certainly important.
Perfect. Okay, sounds good. Well, then you can go on to the next slide. Okay, so just some quick action items for you all. I know that you may be in various different stages of your application process and even college exploration, but especially as you're going into your junior and senior years, you're back, maybe in the classroom on a much more regular basis. I know that the kind of re-entry phase has been difficult for a lot of students. I'm having that conversation day in, day out as I am visiting high schools in Southern California right now. As much as you can, take care of yourself, stay focused on what you can stay focused on, challenge yourself in the classroom as you're able, start working on stuff early. It is no fun to be feeling like you're pulling together essays and activity summaries and supplements at the last minute. Be organized, start drafts and bullet point lists and things like that as much as you can. Also, we suggest that you really own your application process. Follow up, make sure it's complete, check in with your admission counselor, check in with your college or your high school counselor who's sending in your transcript and sending in letters of recommendation. Use the assigned rep for your area at the schools that you're interested in as a resource. If you don't know how something works at DePaul or at Ohio State, reach out to me, reach out to Caitlin and ask. I'm thinking about applying test optional. What do you think I should do? I am weighing, including these different things on my activity summary. What is going to be, maybe stand off the page a little bit more. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses. Feel free to brag about yourself. You don't apply to college all the time. This is kind of a one-time deal for a lot of students. So make the most of it. Let us know what you're passionate about. Own those types of things. And I think you'll be in a good place. And then above all, organization really is key. Any other action items, or Caitlin, should we jump right into those questions?
Yeah, I just want to take, because I know we're right at time, but I want to take the time to address kind of the questions collectively in the chat. And I think what's important is that we want to know honestly everything about a student. We want to know what's gone on, to the best that a student feels comfortable with. And so we really want to encourage you to share those things. I would say, yeah, COVID happened to everyone, of course, but everyone's going to have their own impact. And so if you feel like you want to share it, please do. The point in this process is that not everyone is going to stand out. I read over 700 applications last year. And so everything kind of just starts to blend together as it is. And so what's really important is that we are trained in a sense to really look at a student's application, understand and evaluate their activities and see if they're a good fit for our institution. And so let that judgment, whatever that might be, more be left up to us. That can seem kind of really scary, but that's kind of what this process is all about. So we really stress, especially for parents and how to support students, control only the things that you have control over. Talk with your high school counselors, talk with the rep about our opinion about things. What we're always going to say is it depends and it can vary based on the school. So get a variety of ideas and then make that decision what's best for you, your student, and your family, to make sure that everything that you all want us to know in this process is delivered in such a way.
And then I will just say one more thing. I completely echo what Caitlin mentioned, especially when it comes to, maybe some of those learning differences or hospitalizations. Those can also be things that a high school counselor talks about in a letter of recommendation for a student. So that's, not necessarily something that you have to address. If you, would rather someone else do it, certainly something that you can. But I would also say, generally when we're reviewing applications, we want to make sure that we have support services on our campuses to help your student be successful through whatever challenges they have faced and whatever challenges they might face in the future. So I think you can, be relatively confident that if you are going to disclose things to us in the application, we are really going to take that in gratefully and use that as a way to continue to teach your students.
Awesome. Well, this is our contact information if you want to take a photo, screenshot, etc. This is all that we have time for today. I want to respect the time of the program. So thank you so much for having us. Please reach out to us if you have any other questions. Otherwise, thank you so much. And I'll turn it back to Jan.
Thank you so much, Annie and Caitlin. That was super informative, and I hope our families got a lot of great information from that. That concludes our session, and please refer to the catalog for the next presentations for session number 3. Thanks, everybody. Good night.